a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. I was invited early in the year to present again this year, and at the time my husband had just been diagnosed with a very advanced cancer, and we were in the midst of chemotherapy and radiation. And so I said, I really don't know where we'll be at the end of October, so I can't commit to coming. But then just a few weeks ago, whoever was supposed to have this slot had to cancel. And so one of the organizers emailed me and said, well, so how's your husband? And we've had this cancellation, and would you consider coming to present? And I said, well, my husband passed away in August, but it was very obvious for me to accept the invitation to come. And right away, the topic just seemed obvious. And the topic is freedom from the notions of birth and death. Now, we have a lot of notions, don't we, that create a good bit of suffering in our lives. One of them is birth and death, coming and going, existence, non-existence, and so forth and so on. Sameness, otherness. All of those are concepts that we use, that we're familiar with, but we often don't see that they continually include one another. In other words, we can't have a concept of up without down. We can't have health without illness. We can't have heaven without hell, good without bad, right without wrong, left without right. Every single concept we have in this relative world of ours includes its opposite. And it's not even so much as they come at opposite ends of a continuum, they're right here together from the get-go. So about 11 years ago, when my first grandson was born, I was blessed to be present at his birth. And it was such an incredible moment. His head had barely crowned when there was just this, it's just like a stunning, those moments of insight that just go, penetrate in some way. Seeing that baby's head being born, there was just this deep, deep understanding, death is being born. Death is being born in that moment. Not some other moment. It's right here, there, in that moment. And then I was blessed 2 months ago to be with my husband at the time that he passed. And I have never been with someone at the moment of death. I've been there right before, right after. Well, I've been there at the moment of a mosquito's death, I must confess. That isn't completely true, but a sentient being like an animal or a pet or a human being, no. So it was an incredible blessing to see that experience, which in this case was very tender and very peaceful. It was nothing, absolutely nothing to fear. Nothing to fear. That the notions we have of a beginning and an ending, while we have the experience of manifestation shifting all the time, don't we? I mean, transformation is happening every single moment. Birth and death is happening right now as we sit here in these chairs. You have undoubtedly left on the floor coming in lots of dead cells just walking around this place. We have millions of cells that are dying right now in the body and others that are being born. I remember hearing Thich Nhat Hanh say, and we just don't have time to put on a funeral for every one of those cells. And we just can't celebrate the birth of all the rest. But you begin to see, if you look deeply, and this is the only way that I know how to be free of the notions of birth and death, is to look really deeply into the nature of reality, to look really deeply into the nature of yourself, to look really deeply into what we call birth and what we call death. Because it feels to me as though when causes and conditions are sufficient for something to arise, it arises. It comes into form, it comes into manifestation. That's a thought form, a feeling form, a bodily form. when those causes and conditions shift, transformation happens. There's no ending. Life doesn't end. Birth, death, expression of life, you know? And this that's birthing itself is doing it every moment. What happened to the thought that you had last night? Or the breath that you had a moment ago? You know, you don't think that these things have died, but they've just returned, haven't they? They've just gone wherever they go. They've never, ever been separate, and there's never been a time that we weren't in the midst of this transformation, this manifestation of consciousness, awareness. Unlike Bentinho, I use consciousness in a little bit different way, and maybe I'll get to it later, but it feels to me like consciousness is this awareness as it's functioning in the body-mind. And so in that sense, it can come and go. Death would be one way that consciousness goes. Awareness, no. Awareness is not coming and going from my understanding and my experience. So, if you look deeply into your own life experience, you'll find a few things. One of them is what we call impermanence, right? Everyone would agree that there's such a thing as impermanence. Well, impermanence is, we might say, looking at reality through the lens of time. We need the construct of time to have this sense of duration. What we might call the experience or the recognition of no self comes out of that deep looking at impermanence. If you understand that what you are is this constantly changing and shifting set of memories, experiences, feelings, thoughts, physical sensations, and so forth, none of them are solid. They're all shifting. There's let me finish with the no self piece, because if you look deeply at impermanence, you see there's no solid somebody here. The solid somebody we think is here is a thought. It's the I thought. It's not the true I, it's the I thought. The one that we've claimed, this experience belongs to me and it doesn't belong to you. This is mine and that's yours, and these aren't connected in some way. This feeling came, clearly your thoughts and my thoughts are not the same. But as Bentinho was saying, this is a single reality. It's not separate from anything. Not any experience, not any being, not any coming into manifestation or moving to a different manifestation. So when we look at the obvious outcome of really looking deeply in impermanence, we find no solid self. And this is like looking at reality through the lens of space. Because we need space, the construct of space, to have experience of form. So we need time to have a sense of duration. We need space to have form. But what happens when we're not believing necessarily that our concepts are truth? Because no concept is truth, not the ones I'm using or anyone else is using. No belief is truth. So what's your experience moment to moment of what's true for you? You see, we think, oh, we need to get someplace else. We need to get to a time where this happens and this never happens. As though, in the fullness and wholeness of reality, we can somehow only have experiences of the good, the beautiful, and the pure. But all of those have the opposite in this relative world. We would never imagine that this relative world is perfect, and yet reality itself is perfectly whole. You know, someone brought up in the last talk, what about Ebola? What about starvation? What about this? What about that? You know, in the face of suffering, there could be incredible compassion that may arise. And for me, that's one of the ways that we are moves in the face of human suffering, is it brings compassion. It doesn't say you need to be different. You need to have another experience. This moment, this experience, that's how reality is manifesting. And we cause so much suffering, to ourselves and other people by imagining that it's attached to some solid me that's either doing it right or doing it wrong. And sort of nowhere is this the cause of more suffering, and at least I've seen in so many people that I've worked over the years, as in the face of death. In this culture, we think of death as a failure, don't we? The failure of medicine, the failure of a doctor. Even worse, it's a failure of the me who didn't do life right. If only we had meditated more, had different food, had more sleep, more exercise. I'm not against any of those things in terms of caring for this body-mind. But we don't escape this experience called death. I'm not, no matter how perfectly you could imagine living a life, the form will come to a time where this rental car, it either wears out or it gets in a collision or the parts go missing or something, and we're transformed. Now, we're not transformed in a way that the transformation is a mystery. Let's just put it that way. I think death ultimately is a mystery. You can have an experience all the way to that moment, and then it's unknown, isn't it? But how many times have you died in your own mind? I remember talking to Adyashanti at one point I said, I've had 1,000 deaths. There's been a plane crash, an air, an automobile, an illness. He said, why don't you just wait and find out, when that experience arises, and it was wonderful advice. So I want to tell you a poem I came across recently that I felt was so appropriate to the theme of this conference. It's from a Zen monk whose name was Kozan Ichigyo. He lived in the 14th century. And as the story goes, a few days before his death, he called his students together and he said, now, I don't want any ceremony whatsoever. Bury me with no ceremony, and I want no service in memory of myself. None. And that part actually sort of sounded a little like my husband. He said, I don't want a funeral. I don't want a memorial service. I want a party. I want you guys to enjoy, But at any rate, Ichigyo said these things to his students. And then on the morning of his passing, he apparently wrote this poem, which I will recite to you. And then he put his brush down, and he died sitting upright. Don't you love those Zen stories? They all die in the lotus position, just like, as though that's a better death than one that comes when you're lying in your bed. But at any rate, that's the story of Ichigyo. But his poem goes like this. Empty-handed, I entered this world. Barefoot, I leave it. My coming, my going, two simple happenings that got entangled. Empty-handed, I entered this world. Barefoot, I leave it. My coming, my going, two simple happenings that got entangled. And when I read this, an image came to my mind. You probably all have smartphones or iPads or computers or whatever. And when you're trying to see if the information is going to manifest in this little circle that goes round and round, and you're just waiting for do you know that what I want to mean? Like it's just going round and round and round. It looks like it's a circle, but it's not a circle. These are just moments of light. They're just moments of light. And this is our life as well. Moments of light, experiences, just like that. And we think there's some solidness in the center, the me that's having these experiences. But who are you? You see, that's the question of the spiritual life, isn't it? At least to me, that's the only question. Ramana's question to me in a dream, who are you? Who's talking? Who's sitting here? Who's listening? Who's bored? Who's leaving? Who's walking? Who's looking in the mirror? Who is that? That's not a question that's meant to be answered intellectually. It's a question which eventually will stop the notions, will stop the mind adding to reality. So if we don't add anything, what are we? So I just invite you to close your eyes for a moment. I'm just going to ask a few simple questions, a la Douglas Harding. There are many we could ask, but I'm just going to invite you to answer these questions to yourself based on your present experience without the benefit of memory. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions and just answer to yourself without going to memory for your answer. And the first one is, what is your name? If you don't go to memory, do you have a name? Based on your present experience without the benefit of memory, where do you live? What's your address? Once again, if you just take your present experience as the reality of this moment and you do not go to memory, when is your birthday? When were you born? If you don't go to memory, do you find it here? When were you born? And then one last question for this little informal question time. Were you born? Based on your present experience, without the benefit of memory, were you born? If you don't go to a belief, if you don't go to a concept, if you don't go to memory, what's actually given here and now? So you can open your eyes. These are just a smattering of questions that, one could go on, and you really come to a place, don't you, where you don't know, and yet you don't imagine you've died. You're sitting here without the benefit of memory, not knowing your name, your address, a birth date, or whether you were even born, if you don't go to memory or concept or belief. So in the Buddhist tradition, nirvana just simply means extinction of concepts. It's not a place someplace else. It's not, a Buddha land in the sky. Nirvana is here now. We could call it the kingdom of God. It's this moment, regardless of what it looks like, without any additions. This imperfect world, we could say, is perfectly whole. Reality is perfectly whole. So, if we bring impermanence and the sense of no solid self together with this idea of being without, even for a moment, being without a concept, which includes a judgment and whether we like it, whether we don't like it, whether it's good, bad, right, wrong. If we just bring reality back to its bareness, is there any place, is there any time where you are not? You've all had the experience of coming into this room, and you'll have the experience at some point of going out of this room as a body. But where are you in that activity? Are you not always here? Just here. Here for the next step, for the next thought, for the next feeling, for the next person who comes into your life, for the next idea, for the next thing that wants to manifest and transform itself. Because when you begin to look deeply into the ways that we separate ourselves from life, from reality, from the ongoingness of birth and death, so called birth and death, even impermanence isn't really impermanent. It just means transformation. Because this that's alive, this that's being, beyond being and non-being. You see, there's even being, we can have non-being. But there's something that's beyond any concept. It's available. It's here now. And you know from your own experience that it's your beliefs that create the greatest suffering. Of course, we have a human body. We'll experience pain in this human body. That's a given. I hope none of you do, but it's unusual that we'll get through life with no pain whatsoever. So we're not talking about that, but the suffering that's put on top of it. That to me is just worthy of incredible compassion, number one, and then looking deeply as to what are the causes of suffering for you. And these ideas that we have, that we're separate. Well, you've probably all been in the woods at some point. You've taken a walk in the woods, and you see the trees and the flowers and the birds and the animals and so forth and so on. And you'll say, this is nature. Look at this nature. It's all perfectly lovely nature. And I'm separate from that nature. We think we're the one who's standing outside of nature looking at something else. We're the one standing outside of reality, looking at reality as though it's an object that we can see over there. You are that reality. You are that nature. And you're looking at yourself, or your no self, whatever word you want to use. We're always seeing some aspect of what we are. Bentinho was talking about that in a different way, but always seeing some aspect of what we already are, or what we all have the potential of being, whether that's beautiful or whether it isn't so beautiful. It's the wholeness of being, and can we come to an understanding that wholeness of being actually is just moving itself. It's moving itself as you, it's moving itself as me, it's moving itself as the planets, it's moving itself as billions of galaxies. It's moving itself as research. It's moving itself as art. It's moving itself as this moment in time and space. And when we think we have to get somewhere else to be what we already are, we've set up more suffering. Because this that we are, we can't lose it and we can't gain it. It's that simple. It can't be gotten because it's what you are. It's what you are. So when I talk about no separation, I'm really not talking, particularly as it extends to birth and death. No separation to me is not about meeting an other in some heavenly location or earthly location. It's actually seeing that you are the so-called other, essentially. And simultaneously, these unique expressions are happening everywhere. But not just as something solid that's holding itself up as separate from all of it, but just the manifestation, the moment-to-moment manifestation. Someone asked in the last session about surrender, and it feels to me like our mind doesn't know how to surrender. Have you noticed? No matter how many times you say, oh, I want to surrender, da, da, da. But this process called awakening, in this process, we're being surrendered. And what's being surrendered is every shred of separation. It's the failure, actually, of separation. It's the failure of holding anything separate from this reality that you and I are. And so everything really seems to just want to come into the light. Darkness is attracted to light. Light attracts the darkness. So as we begin to have this experience called awakening and begin to feel like it's moving more and more in this experience called yours or mine, what will happen is that there'll be all these things that will come up, and you'll think, oh, I've done it wrong because now all this crap from my past is coming up again. I thought I dealt with this in therapy 20 years ago or whatever. It's like whatever we have put aside and said, no, that's other, it comes back to be embraced and to be loved, to be loved back into the wholeness that it never actually was separate from. And so love is the expression, it feels like, of this that we are. It's its first movement. Apparently, this mystery loves to be, because it bees everything, doesn't it? It loves to be. And this love that we are, it embraces itself in birth, it embraces itself in death. And love, to me, does not require anything to be different. That doesn't mean it isn't the most transformative power in the world, but it doesn't require anything to be different. Love actually understands. Love actually is at one with. Love is the movement of intimacy. Intimacy is another word for no separation. In fact, the great Zen master Dogen said, enlightenment is simply intimacy with all things. Enlightenment is simply intimacy with all things. And intimacy is no separation. That doesn't mean you'll always have an experience called no separation. The experience is whatever it is. Sometimes we have experience subject-object, don't we? Sometimes that completely dissolves, and there's no subject, and there's no object, and there's just this. There's just this moment. And this moment may be painful, it may be beautiful, it may be whatever it is. And can we come to an acceptance? Because you see, our freedom is really the freedom from notions. It's really the freedom from believing that our beliefs are truth. I mean, we all have beliefs. We all are conditioned in so many ways. But to imagine that they're truth is to set ourselves up for a lot of suffering, probably. So the freedom, and this is, I think, quite surprising to our less mature ideas about spirituality. The freedom, to me anyway, is the freedom for this moment to be exactly as it is. Period. Period. The freedom not to be free. The enlightenment that actually sees that enlightenment is what we are, it's not what we become. When you actually awaken to your true nature, it's true nature that has remembered itself. It's not a me that wakes up. This has awakened to itself. And then you see that there's no separate one to awaken. There's no separate one to get someplace else. Because reality is now. It's here. It's now. It's never anywhere else. And whatever that means to you, it's like the invitation to discover what your own notions may be, to discover what your own places of separation. Because we all have holdouts, don't we? No matter how far we feel like we've traversed on this so-called spiritual path, it just invites us back to this life, this moment, this experience. So with regard to birth and death, the way we become free of those notions is not by trying to transcend them and not by trying to deny them, but actually by looking deeply, really looking deeply. What is this? What are you? There was a quote by Rainier Maria Rilke who said, "Love and death are great gifts, but mostly they go unopened." Love and death are great gifts, but mostly they go unopened. So I think maybe I'll stop here and just share a poem with you that I wrote on the death of my husband, because it kind of brings this together in terms of the experience here. And then I'd just like to open it up. How much time do we have? 10 minutes? 8 minutes. Okay, well, I don't have to read this poem. Oh, you want the poem? Okay. My husband has transformed himself. He is not gone, but comes now as the flowing fountain, bubbles in the stream, the great vast ocean, graceful olive trees, and sturdy oaks. He flies to me as a hummingbird, wings shaping the sign of infinity, inviting me to see deeply. He hops about on the lush green grass as his favorite bird, a robin. At first he came so powerfully, almost in a human form, squeezing my hand, awakening me from slumber, lying next to me in bed or sitting beside me on a park bench. But now, his soul's journey no longer hovers in a familiar form. How can I grieve his freedom? How can I wish him back into a sick body? I do not. I miss his touch, his laugh, his generous spirit calling me to love more deeply. But these now live inside my heart, this single heart we share with all creation. My beloved has not departed. I feel his spirit everywhere I look. It blows as the wind that kisses my cheek. It tastes my tears and smiles at my joy. No, my husband is not gone, but merely transformed, as we all will be one day. Return to the formless spirit we are even now, in these fragile yet resilient forms. Death is not an end, but a beginning of a deeper love, a deeper freedom, a deeper joy that confirms this truth. There simply is no separation. So maybe we have time for one or two comments, questions. Yeah.
So it was very relevant and touching for me when you made the was very relevant and touching when you made the distinction between lack of resistance, but even in that place of lack of resistance, there is still subject-object. Can you talk more about that?
Well, it's the experience of the moment, isn't it? As long as we think that we have to erase the experience of the moment, we're not free. We're on the path to getting somewhere else. So the best way to come into less resistance is to totally accept resistance in that moment and to see it for what it is. It invites us to look more deeply. There's this contraction. I'm resisting this moment. Rather than judging ourselves, can we just actually relax and see what that experience is like through and through? No separation. See, as soon as I put a should on it, I shouldn't feel any resistance. Now I'm in resistance to resistance.
Yes.
Right?
So it feels here that when there is less resistance, which is quite common, there is less suffering.
Absolutely.
But it does not always lead to disappearance of the subject-object relationship.
Does it always?
It does not always. Or
It
often,
may-
many times, it would not necessarily lead to the disappearance of a subject-object relationships.
Well, I think if we take it deep enough, it does. But in the moment, maybe not. Because you can be completely in resistance to, let's say, the jackhammering that's happening next door, construction site for 2 years next to your house. I can speak from experience. But when you actually go into that, and there's no sense I shouldn't resist this. This is like, But then it's going to, okay, so what is that? What's the truth of this moment? What's the truth of this feeling? What's the truth? Well, there's a belief, isn't there? There's always a belief somewhere, I don't like this music. I don't like this sound. It shouldn't happen. They shouldn't have construction for 2 years, or whatever it is, So then we get to look at the belief. Is it true? Is it true? I believe this with my whole heart. There should be no starvation, for instance. There should be no famine. There should be no disease. We should live in a country that could, in a planet that could feed itself and so forth. But the minute I hold that belief as though my happiness depends on that being so, I'm in suffering. There is what there is, right? And that, to me, absolutely increases our compassion for it, rather than trying to get rid of it. I mean, I was not myself accustomed to being in hospital or ICU or, so forth and so on, and just the heart-opening compassion that arose when we're not separating ourselves from this human experience, It opens something. It's a way in. Even our resistance is a way in. There's nothing that isn't a way in. There's nothing that won't take us back to reality because everything is it. So it's a matter of how we're moved in the moment. Sometimes we're not moved to look into something. I don't want to. I just want to feel this feeling. Don't you all have that experience at times? Yeah. So have at it. But the more we're accepting of the moment, the less resistance we have and the more capacity we have for looking into the matter in a way that has the potential of dismantling, reducing these places that are holding out to say, I'm right and you're wrong. This shouldn't be and this should be, and so forth. Yeah. Right over here. Mm-hmm.
My brother died and my father died in the last year, couple of years. And what brought great comfort was Ramana Maharshi being asked when he died, or he was like some of his students said, we're really going to miss you when you go. And he said, where could I go?
Exactly.
And it was like, their two deaths was like, being in those hospitals and things like this, it was like, and I was like, I was there, and I said, where is anybody going? Kind of that background thing going on, and it was really comforting, just.
Well, and it seems so true. They say I am dying, Ramana said, but where could I go? This is someone who knew himself, as we all have the opportunity to know ourselves, to be this. That's awake to the coming and going of life, to the transformation of life, and so forth. It is incredibly comforting. It's kind of like when you see yourself as that spirit through and through. The Heart Sutra form is exactly emptiness. Emptiness is not like an empty box. It's empty of separate self. It's empty of definition. Form is we could say it's exactly spirit, if we wanted to use a more Western term. Exactly. So the spirit that you are through and through, the emptiness that we are through and through, is the same when the form is here as when the form has transformed itself. Where could it go? That's why I see my husband everywhere. And does that mean there's no moments of grief? No, there are moments of grief.